Okay, hi, good morning. I think those were the holding slides, both of them. Welcome to you for joining us, and thanks for joining us today for this NHT webinar on financial transparency with me, Andy Walls, and your host for today, Philippa Ollerhead, who's there next to me, or at least she's next to me on my screen. I hope she's on yours. Thanks for taking the time out of what's a crazily busy time at schools at the moment. We do appreciate that, and we're really glad you can join us. Not only for that, but it's Monday morning, and you want to learn about financial transparency, so you probably get an extra special medal for that. So thank you for being with us. And this is a taster for the course we're running next week with Philippa, which will go into this subject in a lot more depth. The idea today is just to give you a bit of a taster and hopefully drum up some interest for that course. A taster about changes to financial regulations that have come in recently following the 2019 consultation on financial transparency for maintained schools. So looking at financial regulations, party transactions that are related to that, probably more importantly, school budget management, which is obviously key, and getting ready for the hard funding formulae that are going to come in. And so Philippa will be running you through an update on all of that. And helping you understand the implications, what that means for your school and your staffing structures, and how you can help become as financially efficient as you can be. Look at best practice and look at things like financial recovery plans. That's quite enough of me stealing Philippa's thunder. I'll let her go into that at more depth. Just a few words about Philippa. A few housekeeping notes, then I'll leave it to her. Philippa's got a great deal of experience in education at senior level. She's been a head of English, vice principal of a large sixth form college in Greater Manchester, head of a pupil referral unit and of a secondary alternative provision school. And she delivers a great deal of training for us here at the NHT in subjects such as safeguarding, getting ready for Ofsted and multi-academy trust structures, and today financial transparency. Just on housekeeping, we're recording this, we'll stick it up on YouTube, so you can see it again if you want to and share it with friends and colleagues. We'll send the slides around to you. Usual things you'd expect with a Zoom call. There's a chat function, so if you'd like to talk, introduce yourselves, talk to each other, ask questions as Philippa presents, please do. We'll monitor the chat. And we'll come back to them, those questions at the end of Philippa's presentation. Well, that's probably all I need to say. I shall pass over to Philippa. Philippa, over to you.
Thank you very much, Andy. Nice to see you all this morning. Thank you very much for joining me. As Andy said, I'm going to take you through just really 45 minutes. So to give us a bit of time at the end to have a chat, so 45 minutes on the latest financial transparency regulations for maintained schools and all the information that surrounds that we've gathered over the years. So without further ado, if you'll just bear with me a moment, I'm going to share my screen and then I'll take you through to the first slide. Great, hopefully you all got that. Now, before I start, just as Andy said, just a little bit on housekeeping really. What I'm going to do is, as this is just a short session, I'm going to take you through the slides. And then I aim to finish 10 minutes before the end so that we can all, it's a reasonably small group. So my idea would be that as we go through, if you want to grab hold of questions, if something comes into your mind, just drop it into chat. And at the end, we can all take our mics and videos off. I can go through the chat and we can have an open conversation rather than going into breakout rooms. I'll just do an open conversation at the end and we can all have a chat through everything. So without further ado, I'll take you through to the first slide. Just while I'm holding this slide up, I just want to give you some kind of background into my financial experience and where I've come from in that journey, because it's been quite a long journey for me, just to give you a sense of, you know, where I'm coming from and my background with this. When I first moved from headship into being an advisor, which is over 6 years ago now, I worked very closely, just by chance. The organisation I was working with at the time had a link with Lloyds Bank, who are the bank for over 80% of schools in the country, or they certainly were a couple of years ago. And they approached us and said, you know, we're really concerned because we can see that all of the schools that we work with, the majority of those schools look like they're in a position where they're going to fall into a deficit over the next 3 to 4 years. Now, that was 6 years ago. And you know, the reality of that has actually played out. There's been, you know, balance is backed by the government in some shapes or forms, but ultimately our budget has not grown to the extent our payroll and all the other aspects of school and financial management have grown. So I worked with Lloyds Bank to create a set of materials that was about managing resource. It's not about accountancy, it's not about auditing, it's about actually the leadership of resource. It very much focused on the school business managers, financial officers, whatever terminology you use in your institution or your group. But what's been really interesting about the course is it's developed quite significantly over the last 6 years as the government strategy has changed. And I shared the materials with the NAHT and went on to have delivered those in different formats over the last 6 years for the NAHT. Still work very closely with Lloyds Bank, alongside Ofsted inspectors who I work with as my role as an advisor, and the DFE as I'm a verified reviewer for them for schools who are in financial deficit or in financial difficulties. And so I get referred into schools a lot to work with business managers to look at the financial management of schools. So this is all about maintaining outcomes, not affecting outcomes, and managing finances. It's that leadership aspect that we're going to be looking at in this course and in the full course, which we're running next week. So that slide there that you're looking at now is just my contact information. Should anything crop up in the future where you think, oh, I could just do with asking that question, feel free to contact me at any point if you want further support. What I'm aiming to do the next 45 minutes is to update you on the latest proposed financial regulations for maintained schools. So review and discuss the proposed financial changes. Some of these are now absolutely no longer proposed and are actually moving forward, and discuss best practice models for working collaboratively. And I put that last bullet point on because it's still incredibly important to think about how you can work collaboratively. Some of the best practice we see is around working collaboratively and the benefits that come from that. So let me just take you through why I think that's so important. There is a government strategy that has been in place since 2016. When Justine Green suggested all schools should become academies, she was very quickly knocked back and that was withdrawn. But her initial reasoning for that was that she wanted to reduce duplication and create economies of scale by working together in multi-academy trusts. So I just want you to think for a moment about the NHS, another public service, another public sector provision. And that has moved from working as individual hospitals into NHS trusts. It is very much a government strategy that the public sector is more efficient if it works together in groups. Now, I've worked with the DFE for a long time, seen this developing over the years, and I called it death by 1,000 financial cuts. We're still aiming, and the government is still aiming to get us into a position where schools are working together collaboratively in order to prevent duplication and create economies of scale. What I've seen them step back on quite substantially over the last 2 years is the format that takes. They are now far, far less likely to say, we want schools to work together in multi-academy trusts. They're far more likely to say in their briefings, we want schools to work together collaboratively, because they have seen really good practice of groups of schools working together in soft collaborations, in federations and in multi-academy trusts, and all achieving the same outcomes. And those outcomes are looking at duplication and creating economies of scale. And those outcomes are created by the work of the business managers. And as we move through, I'll describe to you some big groups that I work with in the maintained sector who work together. One is in Solihull, there's another one in Coventry. They work together as large groups of business managers and created better outcomes than I've seen in some of the most established multi-academy trusts. So I know it can be done, I've seen it being done, I've facilitated work with those business managers, and I'll describe that to you as we move through. So part of this government strategy is that we know that all schools judged inadequate will be expected to become sponsored academies within multi-academy trusts. And this is managed by the Regional School Commissioner's Office, who decide the sponsor, usually in consultation with the local authority. So that's one element. that has been brought in to force this issue forward about, that the solving of the problem when a school is in difficulties is to move it into a group of schools. We know that collaborative working and economies of scale is definitely their path of travel. There is what was described as the hard version of the new funding formula. Now, the hard version of the new funding formula was eventually going to be that all funding would come directly to all schools from the ESFA. And where we are at the moment is that still hasn't been set in stone and decided. What we're going to talk about this morning is what I see as the next step prior to this last step, which is all money coming directly from the ESFA. That may or may not ever happen now. We've got this middle stage that I'm going to talk to you about today, but the final stage would be that if that were to go through government over the next 12 to 18 months. Now, that would make a substantial difference, as money would bypass local authorities, go directly to schools as it does with academies, and would not be top sliced in any way. So there's a potential for that to happen into the future. But what we do know is we now have regulations around financial transparency for maintained schools. So this financial transparency for maintained schools was published by the DfE in July 2020. And it's broken down into several sections. And one of the main reasons, before I start taking you through this step by step, one of the main reasons that this, the consultation, the beginning of the consultation quite clearly states that the advantages of the government, particularly working with academies, has been the transparency of finances. And what they found the most advantageous is they are far more quickly aware of schools who are heading towards deficit, are already in deficit, and how they spend their money. Now, they're very much more aware of it with academies, because academies have their accounts financed at the end of the financial year. They upload those accounts onto Company House, they have audits, and all that information is readily available to them on an annual basis. And they needed to pull out what they felt was the best of the work that they'd done financially with academies, and that's what they've done, and they've dropped it in for maintained schools, which I'll describe to you over the next few slides. So the first one is about the designated school grant. So the designated school grant has an assurance statement return. So the DfE will collect information on the number of schools with suspended budgets and notices of financial concern through the DSG assurance statement. So all academies can be issued with notices of financial concern. These notices are loaded up live onto the internet. So if you Google the name of a school, you'll see that it has a financial notice to improve, which is quite a negative. If parents become aware of this, it's quite a negative for a school. You know, we know parents vote with their feet. It's probably one of the worst things that can happen to you financially. That, alongside having an Ofsted inspection of RI or below, quite often results in a fall in pupil roll. And a fall in pupil roll creates a financial situation which is very hard to recover from. You might recover financially, you might recover your Ofsted grade to good or better, but parents and the local community, their opinion can take a lot longer to turn around. So there's a real reluctance for schools to be issued with financial notices of concern and for budgets to be suspended. And that would only happen, this is very much what I've been assured by the DfE and by the financial team within the DfE, that this would very much only happen if there was a real cause for concern around governance and financial management. So the DfE will add a new section to the DSE assurance statement that captures the amounts that local authorities have recovered from investigating fraud, should that be a case, and they will also collect information on the number of recovery plans in each local authority through this DSG annual assurance statement. So the recovery plans I'll go on to explain as we move through. So, as I said, this following information is based on the government response to the 2019 consultation on financial transparency. So the first major thing to report is that maintained schools will be expected to submit a 3-year budget forecast to the local authority. So I do still work with some maintained schools. As I said, I'm an active education improvement advisor, work with lots and lots of schools all around the country, a mixture of academies and maintained schools. And I do still work very closely with some business managers who are still on a 1-year budget forecast. They know where they're up to in that financial year, but if I go to work with them, they are still not able to project forward 3 years, 3 to 5 years. And I would say, feel free to drop into chat if you don't agree or you want to discuss this further, but I would say from the work that I've done with the DFE on financial management with schools, this is often around the software that's used to manage the budgets that makes this very difficult for business managers. If they're still using Excel spreadsheets, it's extremely difficult to manually project forward. Whereas on the market, you can buy lots of extremely good bespoke software that links into your SIMS or your Bromcom package and automatically updates any pension increases, any payroll issues that need to be built into the system so that you can plug in your pupil numbers moving forward over the next 3 years. It can calculate your payroll expectations and it can look over the next 3 to 5 years for you. So a lot of that is driven by actually just spending some money on bespoke software to make that job easier. So you must be in a position where you can submit a 3-year budget, and there will understandably be a degree of uncertainty around that. So the DFE recommends planning for a range of scenarios. So that might be a different number of pupils enrolling, and you might have 2 or 3 scenarios, a different number of staff that were therefore required due to the number of pupils, etc. So looking at those different scenarios. What's really interesting, just to sit on this for a moment and have a think about it, this need for all schools, not just academies, to be submitting this 3-year budget is actually also very closely linked to Ofsted and the framework and the way the framework will be implemented from September 2021, when we believe Ofsted will resume Ofsted inspections normally. So we're hopefully, if everything goes to plan, past the worst of the pandemic, with social distancing, etc. removed, and visitors welcomed in schools, therefore Ofsted can resume. But we know that they can't resume in the normal way because they don't have IDSR data for the last 2 years. They don't, so therefore they must work in a more of a school improvement way. And one of the things that's being discussed widely at the moment within Ofsted is how they can talk to business managers during an Ofsted inspection and ascertain whether the budget will support the school improvement plan moving forward over the next 3 years. Now, to answer that question, firstly, you need to know what your budget will look like over the next 3 years. Then, as a business manager, you need to be working with the school leadership to understand how that budget and how that projected budget links into your school improvement plan. How does it support it? So there's 2 very important things I've said there. Firstly, you need to be able to project forward by 3 years. Secondly, you need to be working with your senior leadership team. My view, this is a personal view, is that you should be a member of your senior leadership team. And I think any union, including the NAHT, would back me on that and say, absolutely. In these difficult financial times, it is extremely important that the business manager is recognised as an incredibly important member of the school leadership team. And you should be privy to these conversations about the school improvement plan. And there's an expectation you will be able to talk to Ofsted inspectors about that from September 2021. And there's an expectation that your governors will need to be able to talk to Ofsted inspectors, and your senior leadership team will need to be able to talk to Ofsted inspectors confidently about the 3-year projected budget and how that links into the school improvement plan. So that's a very important point. That's why that's the first slide there. Second is about declaring related party transactions. So this is by the end of the financial year 2021-22. You will be expected to submit this to local authorities by the end of March 2022. So plenty of time to think about this. But you will be required to attach a list of RPTs to your response to the new questions in the Schools Financial Value Standard report. And what are RPTs? Well, RPTs is where your school awards a contract to a person or body that has close links to your school. So this is very much what academies do. This is very much what they have to do. It's part of their transparency. So as an example, if a governor or a member of staff has a stake in a company that's bidding for a contract to be awarded by the school, it must be declared. So it's very much about governance. It's about transparency in procurement. It's about declaring your interests in the governing body, making sure your clerk is very aware of declaring the interests and recording that and minuting it, making sure that everything is tendered, is absolutely transparent. We're not saying you can't do it. We are saying it needs to be transparent. Now, a lot of academies translated that and interpreted that as we just don't do it. It's actually less hassle to say to governors and members of staff, we just don't do that. We don't have people being awarded contracts who are on the governing body or family members of staff. We just don't do it. And that's absolutely your call. But we're not saying you can't do it. You just need to be transparent about it. And it needs to be minuted. So another very important point is that you will be expected to submit a recovery plan to your local authority if your deficit rises above 5%. So part of your budget tracking must be tracking that deficit and the percentage of total spend that you are then falling into deficit. So when these deficits are measured as of the 31st of March 2021, so very soon, the 5% trigger will apply. So it will apply from this March. 5% is the absolute minimum deficit threshold at which you'll be required by the government to submit a recovery plan. I am aware of some local authorities who are asking for a recovery plan when there is a less than a 5% reached. So if you are at 4.2, 4.3, 4.5, they potentially could ask you for a recovery plan because they could anticipate that by the 31st of March 2022, you could be well past the 5% and they don't want you to go into that area. So what is a recovery plan? Well, a recovery plan is very much what external advisors, such as myself, who work with the DfE, are asked to work with on schools. But there's absolutely no reason why, if you're just concerned about a deficit coming up, you can't work on a recovery plan yourself. There's lots of information in the full course that's coming through next week about recovery plans and how to go about. It's about leadership of resources. So if you feel you're worried about that 5% trigger, it may certainly be worth you enrolling on next week's course to take you through all of those wider materials. But in its simplest term, a recovery plan is looking at your 3-year projected budget, and it's breaking it down line by line into every aspect that we could look at to say, can we make savings here and maintain outcomes? That's the crucial thing. There's absolutely no point in just thrashing through your budget and taking out costs and, some trendy things that happened a few years ago that were just a nonsense, and the worst thing you could possibly do, getting rid of all the TAs. I remember that being quite a fashionable thing. Everybody said, oh, we're taking out as many TAs as we can to make sure that we we improve our deficit. And what that resulted in is a lot of schools who came very, very close to losing their RI, to move into RI or below. And then, as I've explained earlier, and you absolutely will know this, parents vote with their feet, and that's the worst thing that can happen for your school finances. So it's got to be done in a way whereby you are looking at your spend and you are making as many efficiencies as possible without affecting outcomes. It may be, if your deficit is far greater than 5%, that you will need to make some redundancies, and they need to be made very carefully in order to manage outcomes. So it's a delicate process to go through, a very delicate process to go through. One other thing that it's worth mentioning at this point for information is that what's interesting in Ofsted's new framework is that they now, when they inspect a school that is good, if they notice things in that inspection, in that 2-day inspection, that they consider to be RI or below, they will give the schools now a 2-year window to improve. So you will continue to be good, and you will have an action plan of things that need to improve prior to a full inspection in approximately 2 years' time. And that full inspection will be to check on whether you've made those improvements and can sustain good, or whether you do need to be moved down to RI or below. That 2-year window was discussed originally, and still the opinion is still held that giving the schools that 2-year window protects schools from moving down from good. And the main backbone of that is to protect schools from going into RI or below, because the DfE understand that schools are so financially tight now, they just can't, they can't survive. They can't survive that fall in pupil roll. So there's all sorts of measures being put in place here around financial management to try to preserve that Ofsted good rating and keep schools on an even keel. And that's all around finance. And they also want Maintain Schools to publish a list of earners over £100,000. Now, I know this will be very rare in the Maintain sector. It's far more common in the academy sector, in the multi-academy trust environment, because you get trust members who are responsible for more than one school and therefore have the highest salaries. But from the 1st of January 2021, you should have published contextual information alongside this about anyone who earns over £100,000. So if you are in a position where you have people on staff who earn more than £100,000, what we mean by contextual information is you need to really have an external report on the viability of that salary and justification of that salary. And that's something that I remember, I'm asked far less frequently now, but in the early days of academies, I was asked to do a lot of working with governing bodies to provide contextual information around high earners, so that could be presented during the audit process. So those are the main points around financial transparency for Maintain Schools that have been recently introduced. The final point is to publish a list to the school's financial benchmarking website. So from 1st of January 2021, you are required to publish a link on your school's website to the school's financial benchmarking website, where your consistent financial reporting, statement of income, expenditure and balances is already published. So all we're asking here is that you actually put a link on. People have put it in different places actually. I've seen it in the governance section. So you have a governance section and then you have a financial management statement in the governance section with a link to this CFR statement. And you need to update that annually. Drop into chat if you're not sure about that and we can talk about it at the end. Okay, so those are the highlights that I've pulled out of that document. Those are the key issues that Maintain Schools need to take on board. And as you'll understand from what I've described, those key issues are moving you closer to the transparency that's already in place for academies. And it's also, I feel it's probably step 2 in a 3-step process. This is step 2. Step 3 will be when all the money comes directly from the ESA rather than via the local authority. And all of that audit will be already in place, working with your local authorities to be able to say, we already have the transparency, now we have the funds coming to us directly. So it's almost like a stepped approach. So what I want to take you through now is a little bit of information about what I have picked up over the last 6 years, working very closely with groups of school business managers around best practice. And it is best practice not just from the academy sector business managers, but from these groups of Maintain Schools that work together collaboratively to create economies of scale. So we know that their driving force is that you need to be providing good value for money, and this will now form part of the conversation that you are likely to have with Ofsted from September 2021 when they talk to you about the budget and its ability to be able to support the school improvement plan. So can you be sure that you're providing good value for money, not only for the school but for taxpayers in general? Can you assure external auditors about regularity, making sure all income and expenditure is in accordance with legislation? This is why I feel much more comfortable when business managers have bespoke software that helps them manage this regularity. And proprietary, can you ensure that expenditure should be dealt with in accordance with Parliament's intentions? It's all about value for money, regularity and propriety. So your financial oversight of transactions, these are things I'm absolutely sure you've got in place. I'm just verifying that this is all part of financial transparency. More than one person operating your bank accounts, financial systems and financial records, keeping full and accurate accounting records that show income and expenditure, that have commentary, that predict forward over 3 years. Taking personal responsibility for ensuring the governors and school leaders are mindful of value for money and cost efficiencies. This is why you need to be reporting directly to governors. You need to be part of that senior leadership team. One thing that's interesting, it's very apparent in the academy sector, and it's becoming more apparent to me in the maintained sector, is the understanding of the pivotal role of the business manager in a school. And because that's a pivotal role, it's a key senior role, there is a requirement that they are available for advice or decision as necessary at short notice. So what should a school do if the business manager is absent and cannot readily be contacted? Who is the other senior leader who works closely with the business manager who could deputise for that person? Now, in the academy sector, you would often say that is the accounting officer, who's often the head teacher, more often than not the head teacher. In the maintained sector, who would that person be? Who would that person be who works closely enough with the business manager to deputise in absence? And if it was a long-term absence, the governors need to assess the risk of upholding financial duties and appoint a temporary cover, just as they would with any other senior role. You wouldn't have an empty head teacher's role, an empty deputy role for a prolonged period of time, just as you shouldn't have an empty SBM role for a prolonged period of time. So some things that we know are real difference makers as far as financial overview is concerned. Ensuring you oversee management accounts every month, ensuring the school approves a balanced budget for the next academic year, ensuring budget forecasts are accurate over a 3-year period, ensuring there is a sound internal control system, risk assessment and assurance processes, ensuring there is competitive tendering where appropriate, and completing an accounting officer's statement annually for the audited accounts in the academy sector, and that's now being translated into the statement that needs to be returned for the local authority. It's exactly the same process now. So your role with public funds is to ensure that your budget doesn't become overdrawn. As we know, be cautious with investments, think very carefully about tendering, use public funds wisely, make sure that you are achieving value for money. So if you just, and also engaging with professional payroll providers. A lot of maintained schools that I now work with who are bigger, larger maintained schools also engage with accountants once a term to ensure that the accounts are transparent and that they are clear and that they are accurate, and it's just giving that confidence to the school business manager because of the size of the budget that they're working with. So these are all things that, you know, if I was to say to you, if I was to sit down and say to you, just describe to me how your school provides value for money and how it manages its budget to provide value for money, would you feel confident to have that dialogue to answer me? Okay, so I just want you to think for a moment and drop into chat, and we'll look at this at the end. How much financial leadership support is there in your school? Interesting question, this. Who is it apart from the business manager that takes the role of financial leadership? If it's all sitting on the business manager's shoulders, then it's not appropriate. Is that business manager supported by a wider leadership team and by governance? Do you work collaboratively with other school business managers to create economies of scale? Do you have a supportive and knowledgeable governor with responsibility for school finance? So I'm asking you these questions, and I want you to have a think about the answers to these questions and to also share any ideas you have about income generation, and drop these into chat so that we can discuss them at the end. The one thing that I think I just want to describe to you very quickly, I'm mindful of time, but I just want to describe to you very quickly a group that I work with in Coventry. They're in Coventry, both sides of a large area. So we've got north and south. And there is a group of business managers who work with a collaboration called the Gateway Alliance, which is a big collaboration of maintained primary schools. And I've worked now probably 3 years, if not, I might be in my 4th year now, of working with the business managers. And I meet the business managers 3 times a year, met with them on Zoom this year, usually it's face-to-face. The work that's been done over that period of time is absolutely fantastic. I would say that group work together better than a lot of multi-academy trusts that I work with. And I facilitate the meetings, and we talk about how we can create economies of scale. So what they've achieved is a list of providers that they've all agreed are the best value for money. So their service level agreements are bought from the same people, so they get economies of scale, they get reductions on those service level agreements, and they've worked together to agree who gives the best, not the cheapest, who gives the best value for money. They share ideas about value for money, and then they all mirror each other, so that what they're achieving is massive reductions because they're buying in bulk, and they buy through their umbrella organisation, the Gateway Alliance. So that's the name that, you know, buys the service level agreements as such. The reductions that they've got are quite phenomenal. They work together on group website creation, service level agreements, as I've said. The main advantage, I think, is the end section of the meetings that they have, which is about sharing good practice. They've really worked brilliantly on GDPR together. They have the same provider for GDPR. And they have shared their good practice. They've also got the cost of that service down. So many achievements. And that's just bringing groups of business managers together. So I know it can work. I've seen it happening, not just with that group, but with several groups across the country. And what they've done is they've prevented themselves from getting to that point that the government felt was likely to happen, that individual schools couldn't function financially on their own. They've bypassed that by working together collaboratively, stopping the need for them to academise and join multi-academy trusts. So have you started that work? Could that work happen in your area? Do you have a supportive and knowledgeable governor? And have you got some great income generation ideas that you'd like to share with the group? Drop all that into chat and we'll discuss at the end. So let's have a look a bit at business setting and best practice around business setting. So first of all, what I've observed over the years is that budget setting best practice really works on subject and year group budgets. And I'm sure I'm going to tell you stuff here that you already do, but you know, just time to think about what you do and perhaps reflect and think about where improvements could be made. So people usually work through a system of budget setting where they look for the need for new resources. For example, there may be a need for resources to be renewed in a subject area that hasn't received much spending previously, or if there's a new curriculum coming in, then there's going to be a need for particular subjects to be given more. If it's a core subject, usually they're given more. So looking at all of those different aspects and deciding on the budget setting parameters, first of all. And then the budget management application should take into account the resource requirements. As we said earlier, planning and audits. Once the allocations have been decided, each leader is notified of the amount and told whether it will be delivered termly or in a lump sum. The school business manager keeps a record of expenditure and issues a termly balance sheet to all leaders detailing what they've bought and their remaining balance. And in any area year group that requires extra funding, that needs to be put in writing with clear evidence, and then a final decision negotiated with the senior leadership team, and sometimes approved, probably should be approved by governors in the Finance and Resources Subcommittee. So that's, I'm just taking you through what I've seen as, you know, the best and the tightest systems for budget management. So let's talk a little bit now about working in collaboration and deficiencies. So this slide pulls together some of the best practice that I've seen in the sector over the last 6 years around creating economies of scale. And these are just some things to think about when you're thinking about, and you know, certainly in the SBN role, thinking about your financial management. So what I really stress, and I've already stressed it in this training already up to this point, is educational based financial planning. Now, it's interesting, I've been talking about this for 6 years, and now Ofsted are going to take it on board, and they are going to integrate this into their conversations. So this is looking at financial planning not being a bolt-on anymore, not being a side issue, being integrated into leadership, being integrated into the school improvement plan, being understood by leadership and by governance. So each thing in the school improvement plan that needs to be improved, there should be a financial column next to that that says, you know, what are the financial implications, and can the school, you know, is that affordable for the school? Strategic financial planning over 3 to 5 years, as we've already discussed. Prioritising the most effective and efficient deployment of staff should be that leadership discussion that happens in collaboration with the school business manager. That's part of school improvement. Are we effectively and efficiently deploying our staff? Do we have the right number of staff? Are we overstaffed? Are we understaffed? Limiting spend on back office and procurement, which can only be done by negotiating cheaper deals, and that is always more efficient if it's done in groups. The more schools that buy together, the better reduction you'll get. Robust challenge from financially skilled governors and head teachers. Staff managing school finance, such as finance directors and school business managers, having the correct skills and buying those skills in. If they don't have them, you can't be all things to all people. I feel really strongly about this, working very closely with business managers. You're expected to be financial experts, HR experts and premises experts. You can't possibly be. You have to buy in external contracts to support you in all three of those areas. So you have the overview, but you have the expertise to call on. And financial systems and processes, by that I mean the right software in place across the school that's transparent and encourages constructive challenge by producing transparent financial reports. And that's what I see with this bespoke software. Really easy to understand and read, transparent financial reports. And another thing to consider, I feel that this is the role of the senior leadership, including the school business manager through the senior leadership team. There should be an analysis of whether all teaching staff are being deployed effectively. They're contracted to work 1265 hours per academic year. Most schools build in a buffer. The pandemic has been an area where I just say, thank God that most schools build in a buffer, and they had an additional 8 hours within that 1265 hours to direct staff towards additional staff training, more time online, etc., because that's never been more necessary. So it's always important to have a buffer. If you're not quite sure and you don't quite understand what I mean by this, let's talk about it at the end. But all staff should be employed for 1265 hours per academic year. That is called directed time. And you will be able to assess the staff's directed time. There are lots of trackers online that you can use to put in all the things that staff do, and it will give you the total at the end. So, for example, their teaching hours, their playground duty, how many hours they dedicate to staff meetings, meetings inside school, playground rotas, dining rotas. Those are everything that, the old-fashioned term directed time, everything that you direct the staff to do forms that 1265 hours. Usually schools have a buffer of somewhere between 6 to 10 hours per academic year that they have extra to direct staff should they need to. And that is about making sure that they are fully utilised. That is making sure you have best value for money from your teaching staff. Do all your teaching staff have clarity regarding their role and their job descriptions? And if they are off timetable for anything, are you getting good outcomes from that? Are you asking them to justify what they are off timetable for? And is that bringing an outcome to the school? Best value for money again. Could you share enrichment provision locally? Are you getting best value from your UPS 3 staff who should have cross-school responsibilities, and your TLRs? Something I picked up recently, which I think is very good, is creating TLR projects that might be for 1 year or 2 years, where staff are given a topic that is particularly relevant to the leadership team. They have to bid for it, they put proposals in, the best person is chosen, given a little bit of money at the beginning, a bit of money in the middle, most of the money at the end on outcomes, and they have completed a task for leadership that they can then put on their CV, talk about in interviews, but it has an end point. So it's a TLR with a financial end point, very popular at the moment. And thinking about how much you employ external enrichment providers using your own staff, which is clearly more cost effective. So I mentioned earlier about the right leadership team. I'm mentioning it again because I feel so passionately that I feel business managers are approaching a time, particularly in the maintained sector, it's happened in the academy sector already, approaching a time where there's going to be more challenge, there's going to be more accountability, and they need to have the right support around them. So have you got that equal challenge from your head, yourself, the chairman of governors, to support you as a senior leader in your school? So we're coming up dead on quarter past, which is ideal. So the financial transparency for maintained schools, which is the full course that's coming up next week, would take you from the point you're at now. So we would go over again what are the expectations of transparency for maintained schools, as I did earlier on this morning. We would look at best practice, as we've just done, but we would then go on to look at how to analyse your current teaching and support staff structures to identify areas where savings can be made. We'd look at how you can self-audit. So I use a system called Integrated Curriculum and Financial Reviews. And I go through in the full course how to actually carry out one of these reviews, and I give you a template to do that. And this is really about digging into your staff deployment and how your finances support your curriculum. So it looks at your teacher ratios, it looks at your salary and the balance of UPSs. You know, some schools are very heavy on UPS 3 staff because they've got staff that have been there for many, many years. Other schools have got quite a young staff, therefore their payroll is much lighter. So it's analysing those differences. It's looking at historic issues such as historic building projects and how that affects your finances. And it's doing that detailed self-audit to try to highlight areas where you can make cost efficiencies. Then you drop that information into what I would call the recovery plan, which we referred to earlier, which is your financially efficient school structures, integrating the best practice models, creating cost efficiencies, usually by working together collaboratively to create reduced service level agreement costs, etc. And then if needs be, looking at where you may be overstaffed and how you can have staffing efficiencies. So that's your recovery plan, and that then helps you to drive those efficiencies and make those savings. And what I tend to do on the full course is ask you, and it's much easier actually when we're doing this on Zoom because you're usually on a laptop where you've got access to this, but to ask you to bring along your 3-year financial plan, so that you can actually refer to it as I'm talking and have a think about what I'm saying while you're actually looking at your own budget. It's really useful, just focuses attention. And then consider communication strategies to maximise the benefits of working collaboratively. So if you're not already doing that, how can you get the ball rolling? Have you got a local business managers group that you could start to use to focus attention far more on the things that you learned during the training, during the course? So that is taking place on March the 24th in the morning and is available for you to still book onto if you haven't already done so. So that's where we would take what we've learned so far this morning onto the next level. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to stop the share and I'm going to ask you to just do that as I'm talking. I'm going to ask you to, let's move that out of the way so you can see me. I'm going to ask you to take your microphones off and your videos, turn them on rather, or not off, come off mute and start your video so that I can actually see you. I'm going to open chat and go through that first of all while you think about what questions you've asked in chat and then what questions you might want to ask me before we get to the end of the training. Okay. I'll just go through that while you have a little think. So in answer to the question, does the 100k include pension contributions? No, it's just the leadership point. It is just the leadership point that that person is on. It doesn't include the pension contributions. Thinking about your own salary, often when I'm working with groups of business managers from maintained schools, one of the areas that we get really stuck on, and I've had long conversations about this, is when I talk about integrating yourselves into the leadership team, clearly it will have an impact on your position and your salary. And we need to have a think about that. We need to discuss it. You know, where are you currently and how will that affect you? If, you know, I'm giving you advice there, but that advice doesn't come without barriers. And I understand that. I've been having that conversation for a long time. So somebody's saying here, I'm in an informal buying collaboration. How is it decided who'll put in the legal work to set up the SLA, etc.? Well, what's generally tended to happen with the groups that I've worked in is that they create an umbrella group. Now that umbrella is either a local collaboration that is set up and provides centralised CPD plus a network for purchasing, or it is just one of the schools who agree with the other business managers that they will be the purchaser and the other schools will put the money into a pot. So, you know, there's not necessarily a legal framework, it's just deciding who will be the purchaser. Okay, anybody that can share with me how how we're working together to achieve savings. So anybody that can share that in with the group.
So, I was just going to say the one you said setting up the legal work. I think it was just legwork. I think it was basically how do we get everyone to work together. I don't know. I may have misread that. I don't know.
Was it legwork, not legal work? That's me getting overexcited.
Both apply. Both apply. Clearly. You need to have a legal framework, and you need someone to get on and do it, don't you?
If it was legwork, I do apologise. If it was legwork, I'll tell you. I'll be absolutely honest with you and tell you what's worked well with them. I've worked with 3 big groups, and what's worked well with them is having somebody who is a facilitator. So that in the cases I've worked with the groups, that's been me. But in other cases I know of where I work with other groups, that's been just a business manager who's absolutely experienced and willing to put in the time to be the chair of the group.
My fire alarm's going off.
Oh, okay. all it requires is somebody who is willing to stand up and be the chair. Okay, so I hope I've answered those questions. If anybody would like to, if anybody wants to now, you know, join the group and share experiences or ask questions, please feel free to speak up now.
You're doing well in very trying circumstances. So somebody's had a fire alarm. Somebody else has got YS bench ball. I don't even know what YS bench ball is.
I think it's year 5 bench balls going on. And
oh,
it's
year 5, sorry. See, I can't read either now. Year 5, okay, yeah, fine.
Anybody would like to ask any further questions or contribute anything further?
I'll abuse my privilege as chair while people are thinking. I mean, it's a perennial problem, isn't it, how schools can best work together? Because years ago when I was allowed and worked in the Department for Education on funding issues, amongst other things, you used to have these things called local education authorities who used to like come together and buy things and bulk buy things and do all the things that schools do. And that was the philosophy then, and obviously the philosophy now has changed very much from that. But how do you capture the best bits of what you used to get from having that when you're all working as 24,000 individual schools? I'm not sure what the answer is on that.
I think what I've really noticed over the last few years, and it's really over the last 6-year period, is as the local authority, the financing of local authorities has demised, and we all know it has, their ability to bring groups together locally has been the biggest hit, really. So if you think about what they used to do with teaching and learning, they bring the English teachers together, the maths teachers together, you'd have all of that subject specific CPD. And part of that would be bringing the business managers together, and they would be able to share good practice and share who they use for service level agreements and share, you know, and that you've lost that. And all that the groups of maintained schools that I work with is bring that group back together. And by default, they naturally then have the right conversations and they start to agree who are the best people to use and buy together to create those economies of scale. So it happens naturally, but it is about facilitating, bringing together that group. Okay. Any further questions or comments anybody wants to make?
I think Rosemary's going to be very popular with the chair of governors, who's a fellow of ACCA. I don't know if Rosemary's going to share his or her details or hire them out to people. but clearly having friends in higher places is a handy thing.
Yeah, if Rosemary's there, actually, it'd be really useful to hear how...
She's on the screen, I can see her.
That governor supports that financial challenge.
Well, she's put, she's mine or mine. Quite right, Rosemary. Don't let anyone else poach her. Very sensible. Got a question in from Sue Potts. I'll read it out because I imagine Sue may have Year 5 bench ball or something equivalent going on. I currently work within Stoke-on-Trent local authority in a highly deprived area, approximately 55% free school meals. We struggle to get qualified governors to support us. Yeah, I mean, there is. I don't want to say postcode lottery, but there is, you know, you kind of get the governors you get, given the area you get and the kind of school you are.
Absolutely. I just add one thing into that I found quite useful over the years. And I mentioned earlier that I started this training off by working with Lloyds Bank many years ago. And they have a system in place whereby members of the bank have to have community links in order to move forward and progress them in their own careers. So it's in their best interests. They have to have these community links. And if you contact your local Lloyds Bank, there may be staff there who are willing to be governors, and just by default, because they work with the bank, they're particularly good on finance. They've been very helpful to some of the schools that I work with.
Yes, that's very true. And lots of employers, have sections of their HR team dedicated just to helping facilitate that, don't they? Exactly. So talk to local employers. Yeah, good idea. Yeah.
So I think we're probably drawing to a natural end here. We don't have any further questions. Anything else you want to add, Andy?
No, I just want to say thank you to people for joining us. The poll has popped up, as you can see. Inevitably, there's a poll. If people care to fill in that'd be really helpful. I mean, I think the main thing to say is, this is a taster. So clearly, there's lots more we can learn from Philippa and from discussing with each other. So do join us Wednesday, the 24th of March, 9 o'clock, early start, for the full version of this with you, Philippa. No, I think thank you for that. I can just plug a few other things coming up. We've got a session tomorrow afternoon with Andrew Hammond and Guy Dudley on issues facing schools at the moment. So if you want to tune into that, I think it's about 4 o'clock. If you want to tune into that webinar with NAHT, that will be helpful, I'm sure. We've got our School Leaders Summit on Thursday and a webinar on diversity with Diana Seiji on Tuesday, which will be uplifting and fabulous, because she was uplifting and fabulous last time. So I'm sure that'll be good. But yeah, if you found it helpful today, yeah, do join us again Wednesday week for the full version, when we'll really go into depth and come up with some more practical solutions.
Sorry, can I just ask a quick question? It's super.
Please do.
Yeah, the slide went off too quickly. I would be interested in next Wednesday, but I'm not a member of NHT, and I was invited by Graham this morning.
Right.
So if you could let us have details of how we enrol on the course, that'd be great. We
will send that out to everyone on the webinar. We'll send you full details of how to join the course. It's on our website as well. It's under Eventbrite, but we'll take pains to send you the thing, and you can join whether you're a member of NHT or not. That's fine.
Lovely, thank you.
All are welcome and all are valued.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Sue.
Okay, look forward to seeing you, Sue. That's great. And yeah, okay, I think probably final word from me then. Just take care, everybody. Feel free. You will get, as Andy said, this does get recorded and goes on to YouTube. So if you want to contact me at any point in the future, if you can't make the course next Wednesday, feel free to. Take care, and please, hopefully, I'll see you again in the future.
Okay.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thanks everyone for joining us on a busy Monday morning. Okay, thanks a lot.
Bye.
Thanks, Philippa. Thanks everyone. Bye now.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.